Hello and welcome to Shay Hanny, the podcast empowering women to make creative career change. In each episode, I interview an inspiring woman who has taken a risk and made a significant career change in order to make their life work better for them. Today's episode features an interview with the inspirational mindset trainer, Caroline Ferguson. At the age of 50, Caroline had a life-changing experience which gave her the permission she needed to leave her business communications job and discover exactly what it was that she was born to do. Caroline, welcome to the Shay Hanny podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Hannah. I'm just delighted to be here.
Thank you. So tell us about your first career and how you found yourself there.
Well, I don't tend to think of myself as having career, really. I had jobs because I just couldn't really work it out to start with what I was supposed to be doing. I vaguely had this idea that I wanted to be a writer, but way back then in my youth, I felt somebody had to give me permission to do what I wanted to do, and I couldn't really work out, apart from being in advertising or a journalist, how I could be a writer. So I answered an ad in the paper for a temp job and ended up working for a business information company in the marketing department, which I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what it was. But it turned out that actually marketing involved a bit of writing. So I was the person in the team that always used to, if there was a press release or a direct mail letter or something that needed to go out, they would lob it at me and I would do all the writing. So that's kind of how I started out. And I just, after a couple of years, swapped for a bit more money. And then after that job turned into a business planning role, which was all about forecasting, radio paging, sales. And I thought, I better leave before they find out that I'm an idiot, So after that, I went freelance as a copywriter, and pretty much that was how things went from then on. I'd write a bit of copy for people. Somebody would offer me a job. I'd say yes. I'd realize I'd made a mistake. I would go off and be a copywriter again. And gradually I moved into the area of business communications. So rather than writing external facing copy, sales copy, I was doing much more in terms of employee engagement communications. And I found that much more interesting, but still mostly on a freelance and contract basis, because I wanted to be a writer, So I would work for 6 to 9 months, and then I would take 5 or 6 months off to be a writer, and that went on for what feels like decades. It was like Groundhog Day, and I got into screenwriting, which is a terrible thing. Don't ever do it. It sucks the life and the heart and the blood out of you, and you never make any money. And that was kind of how it went. It really did, until I turned 50. That was sort of my working life.
Okay, thank you. And you said when you said when you turned 50, but how did you know, and what was the moment that told you that it was time for you to move on and do something different?
Well, I'd been feeling really dissatisfied for a while, and I realized that, despite winning various contests and getting an agent and all the rest of it, screenwriting, I was just getting a bit long in the tooth for it, and it really wasn't working in terms of an income generator. And I was doing a job for a client where I was commuting to Canary Wharf 2 hours each way, twice a day, very stressful. And I was doing a job that I'd done 18 months previously when they got a new leadership team. I was brought in to communicate for this leadership team around the changes. And, within a year, they had another new leadership team, and I was coming in and doing it all over again. And it was basically, I was communicating on behalf of a terrified leadership team to terrified employees in this enormous organization who were all waiting for the axe to drop. And I thought that I've done this before, and there's no legacy to what I do. There's no value to what I do. Nobody believes a word I'm communicating here. And I realized that something needed to change. And it was a particular day that was the catalyst for the changes that came later. It was my birthday. It was mid-October. It was raining. I was late for my own birthday dinner party that my cousin was throwing for me. And I was in the front carriage of an incredibly crowded commuter train, in the dark, in the rain, heading late for this party, when we ran over somebody who had lain down on the track. And being in the first carriage, that person died under the wheels I was sitting on top of. And all we knew to start with was that suddenly the emergency brake went on and all of this gravel was hitting the bottom of our carriage. And we just lurched to a stop. This, a carriage train carrying hundreds and hundreds of people sitting there in the dark, in the rain. And we were there for 3 hours because we were in between stations, and the station wasn't far away, but it took a while. The station wasn't really manned at that time at night. It took a while to get people to us. And of course, all the trains were backed up all the way to King's Cross. And it was a truly horrible, horrible event. They had to get us all off down a staircase at the back of the train that led onto the track. So, of course, we were the last people off. And in the meantime, being in the front carriage, we could see the emergency services coming and then putting screens around the front of the train. And it was really interesting, the different reactions around the train. It was, what's going on? Oh my God, somebody must have died. And, there were a few people going, oh, it's so inconvenient. People are so selfish. Why do they do that? And there's me in tears thinking, there's somebody who's never going home again. Somebody whose family, whose friends will never see them again. And as I sat there, of course, I missed my birthday party, which didn't seem particularly important by then. But as I sat in that train, I realized that this was a turning point for me and that I couldn't continue to waste my life delivering no value, creating no legacy. And I knew that I had to find something that I could do for the second half of my life, which I could do with silver hair because, I was midlife, that I could do in English, that I could do in my own time, around my own timetable, and I could fit around writing because I'll always do that, cut me and I bleed words. And that mostly delivered value to people. And in delivering that value, I received value myself in terms of satisfaction and in terms of earning a living. So I set this really kind of clear set of parameters about what it would look like. The only thing I had no idea about was what it was. And I knew it had to include this sort of creative aspect. What I didn't realize I was doing at the time is seeding my mind with something that I now call brain mining or mind mining, but actually in therapy terms is known as a transderivational search, which is a terrible thing. It's a terrible term. The language of therapy just is not helpful. But what happens is that our brains have this amazing problem, the most incredible, sophisticated problem-solving apparatus in the universe is between our ears. And we're never really taught how to use it. We're taught how to learn, but we're never taught how to think and how to mine this deliberately for, in creative terms. So when we seed it with information, with questions, with commands, with challenges, our unconscious mind has no choice but to try and respond to that. So unknown to me sitting on that train, especially when there's deep emotion involved, and I was, consumed with sadness and a bit of anxiety. When we seed our mind with these commands, with these questions, with these challenges, from that moment, my brain was looking for solutions for me. And it actually took, so that was mid-October. And then at the beginning of January, and almost immediately, I basically resigned from that role. And I just became a copywriter because I needed to simplify everything. I needed to get rid of 4 hours a day of commuting and just to focus on, right, who am I going to be when I grow up? And I need to earn a living in the meantime. So let's just keep it simple, stupid, just pare it right back. So I was pretty serious about this. And then at the beginning of January, I'd won a place on a Channel 4 writing course competition thing that they run every year. And I was excited about that and looking forward to it. But at the beginning of January, my mother had a breakdown, a fairly serious one, and she was in hospital for a while. And I used to be somebody who was sort of the unofficial therapist in my friendship group and the unofficial carer. If somebody was hurt or in mental pain or whatever, they would come to me. And I'm highly sensitive. I'm very porous emotionally. So I would do my best to help. And then they'd go off and they'd be fine. And I'd be left with all the mess. And when people say to me, oh, you should be a therapist, I would say, absolutely not. I'd be dead within 2 years. I can't hold all that pain. And I got to a point actually where it was so silly. I had people living with me who were bipolar, that had come from, this help that I could give. And I was permanently a mess. So I had to stop being that carer, and I had to go cold turkey because I realized I was codependent and I needed that validation. And so I sort of stopped for several years. So when my mother had a breakdown, I was thinking, oh no, it's back to that. And it's my mother. This is really complicated. Yeah. But actually something really interesting happened, Hannah, because I came up to Scotland to manage her care and help look after my dad. And not only was it not difficult, it was actually really energizing. And I realized that in the few years where I'd stopped being that compulsive, codependent, caring person, I'd grown the skin that you need to protect yourself when you're helping. And my mother was going to have some CBT. So after a couple of weeks, I came back down south because I was going to this Channel 4 thing and I was absolutely not going to miss that. And came down south, got out of my car, long drive, went out, bought a book on CBT because she was having that treatment and I wanted to be able to talk intelligently to her carers. Bought a book, discovered that a hypnotherapist I'd seen many years ago had written this book. So I bought that, Googled him. He'd started a college. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Thought no more of it because I'm excited about Channel 4. And I went to bed and I got up in the morning and I was on fire because I knew what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I was going to go to Abbey Joseph's College and I was going to train to be a cognitive behavioral hypnotherapist. And there was no argument. It was just there. So what happens is that when we seed our minds, when we do this brain mining I talk about, and we give it instructions and say, go and solve this problem. For 2 months, my brain had been looking for a solution. And when I bought that book and I discovered he'd set up a college, rationally, consciously, there was no decision. There was no reflection. Unconsciously, I went to sleep and my mind made itself up and said, that's what you're going to be. And you have the evidence now that it's not going to kill you. You've just had 2 weeks of the most intense caring and it didn't kill you and actually energized you. So And I'm somebody who does massive research, but I didn't do any research. I just applied to Abbey's College. I didn't investigate other types of therapy. I just applied to Abbey's College. And 2 months later, I started. I just knew. It was there. It was just a fact, and it was incredibly exciting and really bewildering at the same time. It was like, how the heck, how did that happen like that? It was just an incredible moment.
It's really
so
amazing,
that changed everything.
How the brain it's just doing all those things in the background, and then eventually, bingo, the solution is there in front of you.
And we're never taught that. I mean, I teach all my clients that now, of course, because it's such an incredible resource to have that problem, that solution finding focus and to do it deliberately. But no, I hadn't a clue. I hadn't a clue what I was doing. It worked.
It's an amazing story to that point. And how did you then, once you knew that was what you needed to do, how did you actually sort of put that into action and make it a reality?
So I looked up, as soon as I got back from my Channel 4 thing, I looked up the college, which is the College of Cognitive Therapies, and I discovered that they were starting a new diploma program in March. This was mid-January by now. So I applied. And I got in, and it was weekends, so intensive weekends for a couple of years. I applied, had my interview, I got in, I started. It all happened so fast. And from the first second, it was really interesting because there was never a moment of doubt. And I'm somebody who really weighs things up and does the research, and never a second of doubt. And the first day I went there, we started with a hypnotherapy module. And within half an hour, we were being hypnotized. And within an hour, we were doing hypnosis. So it was really hands-on, really practical, along with the training. And it was so exciting. It was so exciting. So, that was a couple of years. And then I started out as a therapist because I wanted to use this to help people, but also to practice, to get used to using it. And it all felt very natural because that had kind of been my role all the way through my life. But now I had the tools,
Yeah.
I had the understanding, and I had the way to protect myself. So I practiced therapy for a couple of years, but the bit that I found really exciting was what people are capable of once the trauma and the stress and the anxiety and whatever they came to me with, once that's out of the way and under control, it's what happens then. It's this creative burgeoning. It's this energy rising, and this ambition that comes in, these aspirations and these dreams suddenly reappear. And that was what I found really exciting. And it was a natural segue for me to move on into the coaching space. Although I don't call myself a coach, I call myself a mindset trainer, because I teach people to think in this healthy and flexible and resilient way. And what I'm really teaching people is self-awareness and personal leadership. So it just felt like a very natural segue for me. But that it all involves therapy.
Yeah.
All of it, it all comes in. It's all useful.
Yeah. It's amazing how just one thing has just led into the next. And I think that happens for a lot of people, doesn't it? Once you let yourself think in that way or be in that mindset. I've heard so many stories where once something becomes clear, lots of the next steps seem to fall into place.
It does. And it just has always felt like the most natural thing in the world, and really exciting and energizing at the same time.
Yeah. And do you think there were many, I'm sure there were some transferable skills, but were there any specific transferable skills you can think of that you actually were using from your previous job that actually became very useful once you started and retrained as a therapist?
Loads of them, actually, but the two principal ones that just spring to mind are communication and storytelling, which is all part of communication. But storytelling's been such a big part of my life, all of my life. And I use it constantly in terms of helping people to understand the techniques that I use, providing examples and case study type of things, but also communication, because that was my entire professional life is, okay, what's the message I want to deliver? What is the audience that needs that messaging? How do they need to hear it? What's the most effective way to get them to deliver the outcome that we need in a way that was going to get their buy-in? So that, really, that it's communication essentially, but in a creative way, finding the story, because we are consumers of story. There's this lovely phrase, which of course the author escapes me right now. I used to have it on my business cards about 10 years ago, which is, we live in story like a fish lives in water. It's just part of humanity. It's how we communicated for so many years before we had a way to write stuff down. So so I would say communication, but particularly the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And were your family and friends and the people around you, were they supportive of this kind of big career or job shift for you?
Yeah, I mean, they've always been supportive, but I left home to go away to school when I was 9, 10, because my father worked abroad. So, there weren't schools. So I kind of learned how to fend for myself really early. And my family has always been very good at letting me.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I've been very independent for a long time. But they've been kind of cheering from the sidelines, I would say. Slightly bewildered. It's, oh my gosh, Caroline's going back to school at age 50. That's oh, okay. I suppose concerned, are you going to be able to make a living? But that was never really an issue for me, because I could always do contracting on the side. But they're incredibly supportive. I'm very lucky. There's no conflict. It's just very easy.
That's really good. And do you think that taking this making this leap has inspired other people around you?
I think, well, yes, actually, I was about to say, I think so. I know so. I mean, at least one of my clients has gone on to train as a therapist as a result of the experience that they've had, that we've had together. But also several of my friends, they've always been slightly concerned by my lifestyle, that I would take 6 months off at a time to go and do some writing. They were thinking, yes, but how do you earn? I said, because I make sure I do. I make sure I pay the mortgage. But several of them have actually become self-employed, have started up their own businesses. I wouldn't say because of me, but I think I'm part of the inspiration that is around them within the circles that we move in. And at least one person has become a writer, has allowed themselves, has given themselves permission to take up writing in a very serious way, because I encouraged them to do that. So I suppose I'd say yes. I can't take sole responsibility for anything, but I think I'm part of the soup of inspiration that is around at the moment.
Also a lot of it is about people seeing others doing something which becomes more normalized, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
So often we have this idea of what a working life should look like, and
definitely.
you have a 9 to 5 job and it's a salary, but actually we both know that isn't necessarily what works for a lot of people.
And certainly in the last few years, since the great lockup, people have started to look at their lives in different ways, and they really want their lives to be about value now and about quality. And they've got used to, enjoying working from home. So I think more and more people are thinking that they don't have to rely on the man to, the corporate man to pay our bills, and we don't have to be sucked into that machine. There are other ways to make it work.
I think it's empowering for a lot of people just to have somebody that they know or see regularly doing those things, because I think it does empower others. So I'm sure you've inspired that in a lot of people. You mentioned that writing has always been something that you have done and will continue to do. So you were obviously living quite creatively in that sense. But do you think your changing career has enabled you to live in an even more creative way?
It has. It really has, because there were things that I stifled. I mean, when I was growing up, I was always somebody I made my own clothes till I was in my mid-20s. I was a crafter. I used to make toys. I was quite musical. I was a singer. I was a backing singer for a while. I was in choirs, and all that stopped when work got serious. And I made a decision that I could sing or I could write, but I couldn't do both, because they both involved a lot of commitment and time. So I just stopped singing. And it's like you cut off an arm when something that's so fundamental to who you are, it is gone. And for years I missed that. And then when I moved out of London to the country and became, really started taking time off to write, I started to gradually reintroduce those things. But in the last decade, since I've retrained and I'm now a mindset trainer and coach, yes, it's, I've started singing again. I've started making things again. I have now deliberately set aside 4 times a year where I go and learn something and do something wonderful. So recently I went on a jewelry making course, and I produced this. For me, it was just this lovely pendant that had silver leaves and things on it. And it was just the most satisfying thing. And next year in the spring, I'm going on a 5-day songwriting course.
Wow.
So as well as doing creative things day to day and getting much more involved in story, I'm deliberately looking outwards and finding things to do that are going to tickle me in different ways, and that are new and exciting, and also that involve community, because the jewelry making course was a day spent with women, and the songwriting course, there's a whole bunch of us going to be camping in the woods and writing songs together. So I just feel as if I've opened up doors that I closed a long time ago, and it's bringing the light and the joy back in. And it's had an impact on my writing as well, because corporate writing destroys your style. Well, it destroyed mine anyway. It just took all of the light out of it. And now I find it coming back, and I'm finding a voice again, which I thought again I'd lost, a writing voice. So it's reconnected me with my creative self.
It feels like you, perhaps that day on the train, maybe that was the day where you suddenly gave yourself permission to do all of these things that you hadn't done for a long time. Because I agree with you that all of those creative skills just blend together, don't they? And they help to
Mm.
create that story. But it is a lot of it is people feeling able to give themselves permission to go on a songwriting course, to make jewelry, even though you don't have to be a trained jewelry designer, do you, to go on a course
far
and
from
make
it.
jewelry? Absolutely.
Yeah, far
And yet
from it.
I think many people out there perhaps feel that they can't give themselves permission to do those things for whatever reason that might be for them. But I think that's wonderful that I love that you take the time each year to plan in some things that are creative.
It was my New Year's resolution last year, and you know, once a quarter, really, I want to gift myself. And you're absolutely right that it's about permission. And a lot of personal leadership, self-leadership, is about giving ourselves permission to be fully who we are and to follow our values and our talents and skills. So I think, you know, when I'm teaching my clients, self-awareness is the most important life skill, absolutely the number one most important life skill. But unfortunately, only 15% of people, according to research by this wonderful organizational psychologist called Tasha Eurich, only 15% of people are naturally self-aware. Wow. And the rest of us are self-conscious and self-focused, but not self-aware. And self-awareness is about knowing ourselves in depth. It's about understanding ourselves and how we got to be who we are, and also understanding how the world sees us in a realistic way, not in this self-conscious way. And fortunately, I'm not one of those 15%. You know, I was one of the self-conscious ones. But fortunately, self-awareness is a skill that we can learn. And the best leaders are self-aware. And when we develop that skill of self-awareness and knowing ourselves, our values, our strengths, our vulnerabilities, really what's important to us, our triggers, and most importantly, the stories we're telling ourselves all day, every day, 20 to 70,000 thoughts a day, you know, being able to tune in when it's important and listen to the soundtrack that we live by is the most important life skill. Because if we can't hear it, that unconscious stuff, we can't challenge and change it. So it's just incredibly important. And that enables us to be fully who we are and to live fully in alignment with what's important to us.
Do you think that giving yourself time in whatever form that is, and this for other people as well, that allowing yourself time to actually think about those things is important? Because I wonder if for a lot of people, if you have a very, very busy 5 days a week, or perhaps even more than that, job, there is so little time to actually take time for oneself and to reflect and to think about a lot of the things that you've just mentioned. And I wonder if you think that people taking time for themselves is an important step towards what you've just been discussing.
I definitely do. But the other thing I think we need is something or someone to reflect off. Because when we are reflecting for ourselves, we tend to go round in loops and circles, and we don't always dive deep enough. Whereas when you're part of a group, or you've got somebody in your life that can guide you and ask the right questions, and that's really crucial, you know, ask the powerful questions, ask the difficult questions, and hold you to account for the answers, and really know when to lead you in deeper, when to question further. You know, because when you just, a really simple technique is to start with a question. So for example, what's important to you in your life? And then you give your answer. That's your surface answer. Why is that important in your life? Well, because of this, this, and this. And why? And so you just keep each time asking the same question. What then? What next? Why? Going deeper and deeper until you find the heart of it. And that's really quite hard to do for yourself. If you have the right questions to ask, if you're a coach, you might be able to do it. But I find always my, apart from that moment on the train, my biggest breakthroughs have come as a result of being surrounded by other people who are going through that journey, and by having somebody who can guide me through it, who can help me to understand, you know, when I'm chasing rabbits and squirrels, or when I'm actually on a path that is leading me to something valuable, to some valuable information about myself. So I think, yes, self-reflection is incredibly important, but so is investing in ourselves and finding the right support that can help things to happen much more quickly when we've got that kind of support and that accountability as well. You know, we are being witnessed, we are being observed, and we need to show up and do the work.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, everything you're saying makes complete sense to me. My final question is, do you have any advice for anybody who might be listening, who is contemplating a career change and maybe on the fence about whether to take action or not?
Yeah, I would say invest in yourself personally, in your personal development, because we invest in our holidays, we invest in food, we invest in our homes, in our families, but very rarely, apart from on a aesthetic level, you know, with beauty stuff, do we actually invest in our personal development. So I would suggest to everybody that they have a pot of money that they put aside, that they save up for, which is about my development, which is about me exploring me and finding the answers, about me exploring me and finding what's important to me, about understanding my values and understanding what my talents are and understanding what I can do with those and how I can live a life that truly matters. When I started a Substack recently, it's called Born for Something More, because for such a long time in my life, I had this itch, this nagging feeling that there was supposed to be something I was doing or being, and I didn't know what that was, and I wasn't making it happen. I thought it was about writing, and it turned out not to be about writing. It turned out to be about helping other people and delivering that value and having that legacy. And it turned out that my Born for Something More, my something more is helping other people get out of the way so that they can find their something more. And so that whole idea of something more is embrace that about yourself, that there is something more. And it's not about scale. It's not about, you know, inventing things. And it's about the quality and the value that you give to life and that you get out of life. That's your something more. And when you find your own personal something more, it changes everything. It changes everything. Life becomes a really much more interesting place, and that value swap between what you give and what you get back is incredibly satisfying. And it opens up that world of permission that we were talking about for you to really, really understand who you are and be that. Because the most difficult words, people say, just be yourself. But who the hell is that? Who the hell is that? So it's the answer to that question is find out, who am I? Who am I and how am I going to show up in the world? So I would say to people, invest in yourself, find the right person. And there are loads and loads of different people out there. So that can be a bit bewildering, but, you know, start tapping into that area of life, start exploring and just, you know, grow yourself to your full extent.
I think that's amazing advice. So, Caroline, huge thank you for sharing your story. It's really inspirational for me, and I'm sure it will be to lots of other people as well. And I'm sure others are going to find it helpful in helping them to realise their journey and their path, and just to think about what the next steps are. So thank you so much for talking.
You're so welcome. I think when you are inspired, I think some of that reflects out, some of it leaks out, you know. And I'm inspired every single day by incredible people around me, and you and what you're doing with creativity, you know, and actually hosting this podcast, giving these voices an opportunity to be heard and to help perhaps inspire other people is incredible. So thank you so much for having me on, Hannah.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure. That was Caroline Ferguson talking to Hannah Ash on the Chez Hanny podcast. Caroline has a Substack page called Born for Something More, and you can read more about her work as a mindset trainer on her website, carolineferguson.com. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to sharing the next one with you very soon. And you can find me, Hannah Ash, at shayhanny.substack.com or over on Instagram at shay_hanny. Please do leave a comment. I'd always love to hear what you're thinking about my podcast. Have a great week, Hannah.